there, avid listeners. Thanks again for tuning into Sid's Workshop. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Today we're going to be talking about Return of the Evening Star by Diane Rios. And I have to say, this book was a little difficult for me to review because it was really hard for me to really formulate how I felt about it, because ultimately I did like the book. Don't get me wrong. I did like it. I did enjoy it. I thought it was entertaining. I did think it had a lot of merit as well. And I do think that the story does offer young readers a lot of, God, I'm trying to think of the right word. It does offer young readers a lot to think about because it does handle themes such as deforestation and animal rights, preservation of animals, and just the preservation of society without falling into greed in a very thoughtful way. But for me, as an older reader, I read juvenile fiction all the time. I just read two recently that were very good. Ghost Girl and the Troubled Girls of Dragomir Academy. I mean, I like juvenile fiction. I'm a huge fan of the School for Good and Evil series. I love the Percy Jackson series. I really want to read more of Rick Riordan, The Presents, to go into different cultures and different mythologies. But what I think fails with this novel is it just seems very juvenile. I feel like it lacks some maturity. I feel like it's, in a way, I don't want to say it talks down to kids. I don't think it does that. I don't think that's the author's intent. But for me, as a older reader reading this, I feel like it was just one-dimensional. I feel as if the characters were one-dimensional, and the narrative, the dialogue, it was very chunky, the dialogue, especially because we're not just in Chloe's perspective. She's our main protagonist, right? We do switch to other protagonists. We are Silas Stargazer, the artist. We even get her uncle's perspective at one time, which I didn't really feel was necessary for the overall progression of the plot. It was just kind of like filler for me. You get the mouse's perspective. I mean, there are talking animals in this book, and I liked the talking animal aspect. I thought it was very reminiscent of C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia series. So I liked bits and pieces of the novel. I really did. And ultimately I did enjoy it. But as I was reading it, it just felt a lot of the time like it was talking not down. It lacked maturity. It lacked depth as far as the characterization was going. And I think that was very detrimental to my overall enjoyment of the story, because it was just sort of wishy-washy. I get it. It's a book for kids. But you can write books for kids and still have a lot of emotional depth. I think we're in the stage in our life where we can be more honest with children nowadays. We don't really have to sugarcoat anything. We don't have to kind of present everything like it's perfect. I think nowadays we can actually be more honest with our children as they get older, as they mature, about how difficult life can be at times, so that's where I fell in the overall narrative. And it was just very hard for me to get into. I read the first book. This is a book 1 of 2. I read the first book. I liked the first book. But I feel like as well, like this one was a little too rushed. It was a little too condensed. She's trying to save Chloe. She's trying to save her mother and all the people in the hospital from the hospital, because it turns out the hospital is actually evil, right? They take people who, you have a cough. And so what they do is they pretty much take everyone who's sick, put them in a coma, and it's just like, oh, it's okay, we'll keep caring for them. You just have to keep paying this, They're extorting money from families. And when people can no longer keep paying for their treatment, the hospital disposes of these people. It's a little horrific, in a way. Actually, it is horrific. Not in a way. It is horrific. So Chloe and her friends, you've got I can't remember her name, but she's this woman. She lives in the woods. She makes magical pies that make you younger. They've come up with this plan, and then you've got Silas Stargazer as well. He's with the animals. They're going to charge in because the ambulances as well are also inflicting pain on people. They are running down anyone they can to take them to the hospital. So again, horrific. So that's what they're doing, and it's just kind of, it's hard to get into just because you have a lot of different elements happening at once. You've got Silas Stargazer. The book is called Return of the Evening Star. I only remember seeing the Evening Star return for one scene. So I didn't really see the importance of the Evening Star other than to go to Silas Stargazer and be like, hey, we need to get all the animals together. There's a lot of bad stuff happening in this town. It has to be stopped. The animals are getting angry. Right? So it was just kind of clunky, for me to read this book. It was kind of clunky. It didn't really feel cohesive. I think the pacing was lacking. I think the tension was lacking, which again, it really shouldn't. Like I said, there's a lot of horrific things that are happening in the book, but it seems very underdeveloped as an overall story. I do like its themes. I don't like that we're given certain character perspectives that don't add anything to the plot, like her uncle's perspective for one. That wasn't really essential. I don't think we also needed the mouse's perspective for that one scene where Chloe's like, hey, go get my friend who's at the hospital and bring her here. So we're following the mouse's perspective, and then we're following that girl's perspective for that one scene. And I'm like, that was another scene that it didn't really add anything to the story. It was just kind of there for plot purposes, just to show like, hey, this is what happened when the mouse went. It wasn't really necessary overall. It was not necessary for the overall development of the plot. It didn't really add anything to the story. And I feel like when authors do that, and this is a pet peeve of mine, I will admit that, when authors do that, they just kind of insert perspectives for a one-time thing, and it doesn't really add anything other than to show, hey, this is what's going on outside of our main protagonist's perspective, so this is what I want to show you. If it doesn't really add anything to the story, I don't think it's necessary. And in this case, it didn't really add anything to the story. We have a bunch of other animals that are talking. We didn't really need the mouse's perspective. So, that's my 2 cents on that. And it really is a pet peeve of mine when authors do that, when they just kind of want to show what's happening outside of your main protagonist's perspective and insert a scene that doesn't really add anything other than to show and tell the reader. So, you're just telling the reader what's happening. And it didn't add anything ultimately. And it really did spoil my overall enjoyment of the story, because I really did think, there was a lot more that could have happened. There was a lot more that could have been done. I think the story could have been written in a more mature way. I think that, if you're a parent and you're looking for something, that's not really heavy on themes, looking for something very clean, I know a lot of parents out there, like, is this age appropriate for my child? Yeah, this is going to be one of those books. It is very cleanly written. It does have a very happy ending. It is wonderful for young readers to read. It's not really heavy. It doesn't really have a lot of heavy themes. It does talk about heavy themes. I think there is that underlying story of preservation of animals and deforestation, but overall, ultimately, it was just okay. And again, if you're worried about your kid, being, sorry, my daughter's starting to cry, so I have to wrap this up. If you're worried about your kid reading something appropriate, this is definitely going to be one of those books that is appropriate, because it is very clean, it's very concise, it does have a lot of happy endings in the end. So it is a wholesome story. I'll say that. It is a wholesome trilogy. It is very wholesome. It's very sweet. I just think for me personally, it lacked some depth that I'm used to when it comes to reading, or that I'm really picky about. So this was Return of the Evening Star. It gets 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't terrible. It was lacking something for me, which made it really difficult for me to present my feelings on it in a very clear, cohesive way. So once again, 3 out of 5 stars if you want to purchase the book. I just say purchase the book from your local bookseller or online book retailer. Support your bookstores in any way that you can, instead of getting them off of Amazon, please. That's all I ask. If money's tight, there's also your local library, another great resource for readers like you to get books for free, because it costs nothing. And on that note, I hope you all continue to support me here by liking this podcast, sharing it with all your book loving friends, and subscribing to it. You can also become a supporter on Buy Me a Coffee, or by purchasing one of my handmade candles. I will include links to all of this in the description. You can also become a supporter on Anchor FM, my recording platform, for just 99 cents a month. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and as always, happy reading.